Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're keeping it geekly. With our new guest, we have Ben Morse. We're here to break down We Are Scarlet, Twilight, issue 4, and everything in between. Ben, welcome to the stream. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one heck of a story. I really, really loved it. We have a superhero who's also a vampire in the 1930s Manhattan setting, and it's an awesome combination of sci-fi and pulp adventure. Ben, I love this story. Before we dive into it too much, though, let's begin with the basics of who you are and how you got into creating comics.
So I'm an artist and writer. I always loved comics ever since I was a kid. Once I realized I was not going to be a baseball player, I pretty much decided that comics was going to be what I did with my life. So I'm a graphic designer and animator for my day job, and I'm working on comics. Hopefully, more and more moving to making that my full-time occupation. So, just been chopping away at it ever since I've been a kid, really.
Man, something about high school and sports, right? I was on the basketball team, always sat on the bench, and it was just heartbreaking not like getting that shot like you thought you were going to. When you started creating comics, though, what was some of your earlier adventures into sequential arts?
I would do, when I was really little, I would be just drawing Batman stories. I'd fold up bits of paper and just draw, think I was going to do a comic in the day. And I would trace old comics, things like that. As I got a little older, into high school, I was mostly consumed with learning painting, learning the basics of drawing, so I get into a good art school. But I do kind of like fan fiction-y comics on the side, like Star Wars stuff and that sort of thing. And went through art school, kind of learned the trade. And as soon as I got out, I was always working on developing pitches that I would never quite finish up or see through. And when if they get rejected, I kind of keep working away at them, and basically just been knocking on the door as far as comics are concerned ever since then. So I was doing some kind of science fiction adventure, more of a sci-fi guy. So most of my stuff is a little bit inspired by that, but also a big superhero fan, which is, of course, how you get We Are Scarlet, Twilight.
So we are coming across the collection of issues 1 through 4 in a nice hardcover bound book. Can you give us a little bit about what We Are Scarlet Twilight is about? I know I talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but our protagonist, Captain Lancet, is an awesome protagonist. Can we get a little bit about him as well?
Yeah, so he is a two-fisted 1930s crime buster in Manhattan. He does have a dark secret. He's a vampire. So we find that out pretty early on in issue 1. And as that story progresses, he gets in a little bit over his head with his villains, finds himself in a coma for over 100 years. He wakes up, his villains have all turned into vampires themselves, and they've taken over the entire world. So he's vastly outnumbered. He's stuck in a future he doesn't quite recognize, and he's got to figure out a way to put the world right again.
I love it. And we have some awesome influences with this as well. You touch upon the golden age of comics, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, big way. Yeah, big way for that.
So what were some of your influences when creating this character design?
There's a lot of old comics I looked at in costume design. I was actually pretty lucky. The only character I think that I really looked at that I wanted to be like, there are elements of that uniform that I absolutely want to have in Captain Lancet was the Phantom. That's why he's got the 2 guns. That's why he's got the mask like he does, and the belt sort of thing. I wanted that silhouette seemed right to me. A superhero with the sort of cap, mask thing, and the 2 guns. That felt almost like something you really only see from the Phantom, and it just really put it in the era. As far as the rest of the design went, I got really lucky. I was exploring a lot of basically looking at all the Golden Age comics I could find, looking at all the elements they had, be those like the silly big collars, the way the capes were drawn. Sometimes like half the guys didn't have shirts or had like just shorts on, like Namor does. They were all weird, and I was just mixing those up. I had this idea, though, that I wanted something about, I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect. He does these window patterns that are really cool Art Deco designs. I knew I wanted that to be in there somewhere, and I was kind of thinking it would be, if there was a bit of padding on the costume, there would be a real faint design. And so I had this transparent layer of one of those window patterns in my artboard, and I accidentally cloned one and flipped it, and they overlapped each other, and that gave me almost what Captain Lancet's logo is. So
That
I
is
saw
so cool.
that like design a little bit. I wish I had taken a screenshot of that happenstance. It wasn't exactly it, but I was like, there's something cool happening there. I thought, all right, if this part's the logo, if this part's the color behind it, I throw some like piping in to give it like accents, and it was pretty much there then. So that was a pretty good stroke of luck, I think, because I was really hitting the wall in terms of, do they have the collar, do they have like the jacket, sort of thing, the puffy sleeves, any of that, and really not finding that any of that worked out when I came across that design, and kind of just fell out of the sky, I guess.
Happy little accident, right? It's awesome how they
Absolutely.
just overlapped and created that. Real quick, we have our good friend Ben Humanick from Band of Bards. I'd love to know more about Ben's art process. What is a combination of references, CGI models, and other tools that help him draw so well and consistently?
Well, I don't know if it's that consistent, but I work on that a lot. Actually, I feel like I need to be a lot more consistent, but I appreciate it. It depends on I usually will do. Well, I'll break it down two ways, because there's a lot of different situations. I think the best results I ever get are if I have time. If I set up a mannequin, which is to say, something just like those, be it in 3D or a photograph of a mannequin, where it's like almost like a skeleton with like a big block of wood that's the hand, and a head-shaped block without features that is the head.
Mhm.
If I set those up and use that as reference, and I have to build it out myself mentally, those tend to be the best results I ever get. So that takes a little longer, and it depends on how complicated the shot is that I need. So ideally, I do that when I have time to. Or if it's something like, you had a couple images up there that were like profiles, without too much foreshortening. If it's something like that, I just make it up. That's not too that's not too hard to put together, and that's just based on it being faster. If it was faster to set something up for like a straight on headshot, I would do it. I'm doing everything myself, and I pretty much think I'm going to continue to do that. So anything that I can speed up my workflow with, I'll do. As far as backgrounds are concerned, I'll set up SketchUp models or 3D scenes, depending on the complexity of them. There's a lot of my backgrounds, if you look at, they're not really that three-dimensional. They're a pattern that I
Mhm.
like, that I treat completely two-dimensionally, and then I'll figure out where that would be in space, and then kind of shade it based on that. If there's a building I use over and over again, I'll tend to get a model for that. And especially for things like, there's a scene in issue 2 and 3 where they're stuck on a bridge and surrounded by enemies. For something like that, I'll set up a model. Even if I'm not going to use it for the artwork, I'll use it to, almost like I've set up a model on a table or something, because I'm
Mhm.
I'm using it to keep track of like a basketball coach making up plays or something like that.
Yeah.
That's just, it's not necessarily always about the art, although it's helpful for that and can speed things up. I'll use it to just keep track of the scene. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it, is whatever's fastest. If there's a building that's almost a character unto itself, there's almost certainly a model I have of that, and I'll use that to, you know, not always necessarily trace it or draw from it, but just to set it up and think about, like, okay, I know what's in this scene. Does it look cool if I'm looking up here? Is it better if I'm looking down here? It's really part of my process in layouts to have, and sometimes it can just be blocks in a Blender file,
Mhm.
to figure out what would be a cool angle if I don't have a really strong image in my mind. So that's my not too clear but very drawn out answer. Is It's whatever's fastest and whatever gets the best results, time
No,
permitting.
awesome question, Ben. Thank you so much. And Benjamin, like, holy crap, it's really remarkable to hear just how much goes into the creative process when you're working on this. I think right now would be a perfect segue. Let's head over to Zoo, pull up the campaign, and see what we're campaigning for today. So I am curious, being the writer, the artist, and the letterer, do you ever find it challenging sometimes, like when it's just you, like hitting a wall?
Not too much. I think that there was a bit of a problem with my other book, August Purgatory Underground, and I was
Hmm.
developing it for almost a decade. Done a million versions of it, and it became a little hard for me to keep track of what I had established in each draft.
Hmm.
So if I put it down for a few months, worked on something else, started over, I'd find myself in the middle of issue 1 realizing that the audience doesn't know this thing about the character that I know because it was in the previous draft, but not in the current one. when it came to We Are Scarlet Twilight, it was not too hard to really get at the story. The elements kind of wrote the story themselves, because I would just approach it like I was planning it, more or less. I would take the elements I wanted to include, figure out the best resolution for each of their sort of mini stories within the larger story, and that kind of folded itself out pretty neatly. And as far as being the artist as well, I have a hard time understanding how people don't write and draw their own comics, in terms of thinking about, well, how is this scene gonna look? I mean, what's it gonna say about these characters to be in this place? How tall is the ceiling? What does that make the characters feel like? All those things are so linked to my writing process, because I'm able to know that I'm going to be able to tell a lot of the story with visuals, and not necessarily have someone do or say something. So I can't even imagine separating them. And I think that's obviously something I'm pretty lucky to be able to do, because I can just think like, all right, here's some kernel of information I got to get across to you.
Hmm.
Do I draw that? Do I show it in the background? Do I show it in an awkward pause between the characters where nobody says anything? I can kind of look at that and say, here's all the writing tools, here are all the art tools to accomplish that, and figure out the best combination or thing to use.
And I mean, it has to be awesome being a combination of all three, because there's no crossing wires. There's nothing to get lost in translation, because ultimately you are the creative team involved. We are looking at We Are Scarlet Twilight issue 4 and hardcover collection, currently at $12,116 of a $6,000 goal, with 301 backers and 6 days left to go. Everyone watching, right here is the link to check it out with us. If you're able to back, we would love to see it. But if you're not able to, simply putting this on Facebook and Twitter helps just as much. Word of mouth is 100% free, and you have nothing to lose. We have Dennis Winfrey also saying, writer, illustrator, and letterer, that's amazing. Yes, you put some work in, and it is gorgeous. Ben, how are you feeling right now? You doubled your campaign. You broke 300 supporters. Just killing it right now.
I'm feeling great about it. I mean, I really appreciate all the support this series has gotten. From the first Kickstarter to now, people have stayed with me through the story. People were ready to give this a chance. I felt like it was going to be a pretty niche book, in that you really had to know a little bit about not just superheroes, but superheroes in, say the 1940s, what old Batman was like, what the Shadow was like, those kinds of things. So the support has been really overwhelming, and I really appreciate it.
And real quick, guys, we'll go over a couple of the tiers here. You can get the PDF version of issue 4 for $5, the PDF version of issue 4 Deluxe Extra Edition for $7, a print issue at $8. So outstanding price for a physical there. We have the print issue of 4 variant cover at $10. You can get print issue or edition of issue 4 Deluxe Extra for $14. And then all versions of issue 4 for $28. We have that hardcover coming in at $38, hardcover plus issue 4 at $44, and then deluxe bundle at $60. So some outstanding prices here as well. How is it running the campaign on Zoop? I heard they do a lot of the footwork for you. So do you feel like the campaign has been going pretty smoothly on that end?
Oh, absolutely. I can't say enough great things about working with the team at Zoop. They're the biggest thing I have to say that I think would matter to backers is, as of now, the book is done. I think I finished it last weekend. So that was not the case with any other campaign, because I'm sitting there planning things out, wondering what shipping is going to cost in 4 months, stuff like that, that you waste so much time doing, you have to do, but it's almost kind of, an impossible task, in that the longer I plan it out, the more it takes to do the book, the longer the process takes, and the less, the more things will change in the interim. So that I looked at the delays on 3 and figured that absolutely had to change. I had been talking with Zoop, and just having them do all that legwork as far as the campaign setup is concerned, just sped up my production process in the book, like in a huge way. So that's the best thing, I would say, as far as things that are, have value to anybody looking to read the book and back it. On another note, just getting the word out, the people at Zoop are comics people, and that's great. Not just in terms of the connections they have, and they can get me on, shows like this and stuff like that, but they have great suggestions on how to set up the campaign, what types of things to offer, what people have backed in the past, what people, and the things I would not necessarily know. And at Kickstarter, I mean, I've never talked to anyone at Kickstarter. I've tried a few times. They don't give you any guidance. I don't have a relationship with anyone at Kickstarter, but people at Zoop will be like, hey, you should try this. Hey, we had great success on this campaign doing this type of thing. Would you be up for that? And that comes out of them being comics people who love the indie comics world, who love the comic format, and are really helping even the creative parts of the book, I think, really flourish. So can't say enough good things about him.
It helps when you have a human to talk to too. Like having a face to correspond with is just, it's something about that. Real quick, guys, last but not least, we have some awesome add-ons too. You have one last chance to get an original piece of art as well for $75. Do you do all your work traditionally?
No, actually. So these are, and this is a thing I kind of was referring to earlier. I'm all digital, aside from a few pieces I've done, on pen and ink when my eyes will cooperate with me. But these are digital prints that we're only going to print up once ever and come with a certificate. And this is something that the team at Zoop said, hey, do you want to sell like originals of your digital art, like at 11 by 17? And I thought, do people want that? And they said, yeah, people go for that. So, well, yeah, people want it. Absolutely. I'd love to offer smart. That. So, and they were right. So I'm really glad to see that. It'll be a nice print on good paper, come with a certificate. And obviously I'm not going to be selling 20 more of them, cons or anything like that. So it is a one-of-a-kind item, and a nice way to see the art up close.
Awesome. So with that being
said, all my mistakes if you're looking for them.
With that being said, it is time for us to begin wrapping things up. So real quick, let me go ahead and switch back over to our main scene. Now, with that being said, what's next for you in 2023? Like, what else can we expect from you? Any future installments?
Future installments. The next installment of Captain Lancet's adventures are going to be called We Are Scarlet, Twilight, Cobalt Crisis. I mentioned earlier, the tone is going to change a little bit. A lot of the series is about really establishing who Captain Lancet is as a person and a hero. And the next ones are going to be a little more plot driven, a little bit more, are these characters going to survive? I've likened the first one to a few people when I'm talking about it to the first Rocky movie, where there is some suspense if he could win the fight, but you really just want to see what he's made of. And he does too. That's the suspense of the movie. That's kind of what We Are Scarlet, Twilight is about. The next one is going to be more, can he beat the Russian? Not that he's fighting Russians in Captain Lancet's adventures, but it's going to be a combination of kind of Secret Wars or Crisis on Infinite Earth type story, like a big universe-shattering crossover type thing, but I'm going to do it in the style of 1940s comics. So it's almost like if Crisis on Infinite Earth had happened in 1945.
That's
it would
awesome.
Look like this. So we're going to have some great guest stars in there that no one has guessed yet, but I've laid some groundwork for that I think are really going to surprise people. And that's hopefully going to get started late this year. I'm working on the sequel to my sci-fi book, Character August. That's going to hopefully be out this year as well, or at least started this year. And as far as We Are Scarlet, Twilight is concerned, you can get this campaign now. We also have it coming out in shops from Red 5 Comics, the first issues and previews now. So check with your local comic store because they can get you that too starting now. And I think that will be in stores May 24th and once every month after that.
Awesome. So Ben, before we let you go, I always love asking for a little bit of advice. And earlier you said something that kind of like struck my interest about how writers should be a little bit more of an artist, like how it'll help their writing, their script, a little bit of everything in between. So for anyone who is looking to do that, they're already an established writer and they want to start getting into that, what would just be some of the basics they should try to approach to kind of help them get into that?
I'd say there's a few good ways to go about it. The simplest one would be do not be afraid to draw. You don't have to be good to communicate an idea visually. I always say that to my clients at work, and people are always afraid, oh, you're an artist. I'm not as good as you. I'm going to make fun of that. And this is a form of communication. Drawing is. Mm-hmm. It does not need to be correctly proportioned. It does not need to have perfect perspective or sometimes any perspective. But if you're a writer and you were just drawing literal stick figures, even bad ones, you are going to learn a lot about what your artist needs to do to translate your story into visuals. And I'm not talking about creative decision necessarily. I'm just talking logistically. Wait a second, did this character say this before when he was over there and now he needs to be over here for the scene to work? You're going to have to iron those problems out a little bit yourself, and you're going to be in a much stronger position to do that. And I'd say there's also a lot of good tools out there online. You can probably find ways to set up scenes really, like Blender is free. Your characters could be literal boxes that you take screenshots of and figure out your panels, your angles. And again, it doesn't need to be a visually appealing thing. I think of it, something like that, as just a logistical tool. Can this character be here, do this, and then do this 5 panels later? Or what needs to happen for that to occur and make sense and not be jarring? So I think that's something I'd always hope writers would do. I've seen a lot of scripts for storyboards or comics where, one character, the frame will read, Barry Allen walks into the room. He picks up his coffee, takes a drink, puts down the paper, and goes over to the microscope. Panel 2, like, wait a second, I guess the Flash could do it that fast. That was a bad name to pick. I always joke that wouldn't work unless the guy was the Flash, is where it popped into my head. But people will put multiple actions in one frame.
Mm-hmm.
This forces you not to think that way. And your storytelling is going to be a lot better for it.
Thank you. That is some awesome sound advice. Everyone watching, right here is the link to back this awesome campaign today. You only have 6 days to do it, so make sure you get on it before you lose that chance. With that being said, it is time for us to wrap up. I hope you all have a lovely day, but most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.